There are many heroes in the Bible, but the story of Moses stands out for its vividness and mystery. He was chosen by God for great deeds and became a symbol of faith and liberation. His life was full of miracles, difficulties, and trials, but the greatest mystery was revealed at the end of his journey when Moses died. His death was unusual. The Bible says that God himself buried Moses on a distant mountain, and no one knows his grave, and this raised many questions. Why did God bury him, and what was so special about Moses? His story begins in Egypt during a time of harsh slavery, when the Jewish people suffered under the oppression of Pharaoh. A terrible order was given to destroy all male infants. To save her son, Moses' mother hid him for 3 months and then, with pain and faith in God, she placed the baby in a basket and set it adrift on the Nile. The basket was found by the Pharaoh's daughter, who took pity on the child and raised him as her own son. Moses grew up at court, received the best education, studied Egyptian sciences, strategy, medicine, and the art of governance. He could have lived like a prince, enjoying wealth and power, but in his heart lived the memory of his true people. He saw their suffering and could not accept it. Once, he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he could not stand by and watch. Wealth and power, but in his heart lived the memory of his true people. He saw their suffering and could not accept it. Once, when he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Jew, Moses could not contain his anger and killed the offender. Realizing that his deed had become known, he fled to the land of Midian, leaving behind all the riches of Egypt. There he began a new life. He married Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian. He had children and tended sheep, leading a simple life far from politics and bloodshed. But in the silence of the desert, his soul sought God. It was then that he saw the famous burning bush, which blazed but was not consumed. God spoke to him by name and revealed his will to him, saying, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses was afraid and covered his face, but God gave him a great mission to return to Egypt and lead the people out of slavery. Moses initially resisted, saying that he was slow of speech and would not be able to convince Pharaoh, but God promised to be with him and gave him his brother Aaron to help him. When Moses returned, he challenged Pharaoh and showed God's power through 10 terrible plagues, each of which crushed the pride of Egypt and their gods. Finally, after a terrible night when all the firstborn of Egypt died, Pharaoh let the Jews go, but soon changed his mind and chased after them. Moses led the people through the desert, and one of the most striking scenes is the parting of the Red Sea, when the waters parted and the people passed through on dry ground, while Pharaoh's army perished in the waters. After that, Moses led the people through the desert for many years, facing murmuring and unbelief. He climbed Mount Sinai, where he received the tablets of the covenant from God written with his finger. He taught the people the laws, purified their faith, built the Ark of the Covenant and the Tabernacle of Meeting, and prayed for them when God wanted to destroy them for idolatry. But his journey did not end in triumph. He did not enter the Promised Land because his disobedience at the waters of Meribah, where he struck the rock with his staff in anger instead of simply speaking the word as God had commanded. Before his death, Moses blessed the people and ascended Mount Nebo, where God showed him all the land that his descendants would receive, but said that he himself would not enter it, and there Moses died, as it is written in the Bible. God himself, no one knows where his grave is, and this mystery remains unsolved to this day. For many, it is a sign of the special closeness between Moses and God, a symbol that his life was completely in God's hands from beginning to end, and that his mission left an indelible mark on the history of faith. Trusting in God, Moses raised his hand over the waters. And God divided the sea, opening up a dry path for Israel to escape from the Egyptians. This became the greatest miracle and symbol of the liberation of the people. During his long leadership, Moses witnessed God's constant care. He saw manna falling from heaven to feed the hungry and water flowing from solid rocks to quench the thirsty. In the desert, the people grumbled and doubted, but God showed his faithfulness again and again. Moses climbed Mount Sinai, surrounded by rugged hills and desert valleys. There, in darkness and fire, God gave him the 10 Commandments, which laid the moral and spiritual foundations of Israel's life. From that moment on, Moses ceased to be simply a military or political leader. He became a true mediator between God and the people, a judge, prophet, and lawgiver. Mount Sinai changed his life and mission forever. God spoke to him face to face as a friend, revealing laws and instructions for the people. It was then that the Ark of the Covenant was created as a sign of God's presence among the Israelites. Moses taught the people to follow these laws, fought against idolatry, and bore the burden of their sins, asking God for mercy. Despite his faithfulness, he was unable to enter the promised land. His journey was coming to an end. In the last year of his life, he reached the border of Canaan, but God said that he would only see the land from afar. Moses, he was 120 years old when God commanded him to climb Mount Nebo and look for the last time at the land he longed for. In Deuteronomy, God said, "This is the land I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will show it to you with your own eyes, but you will not enter there." Moses accepted God's will, even though he knew he would not share the joy with the people. He passed away peacefully, not of infirmity or illness. The Bible emphasizes that his eyesight did not dim and his strength did not wane, even in old age. He remained strong and healthy, ready to fulfill the Lord's last command. And then something amazing happened. The greatest mystery was that Moses was buried by God himself. Scripture says, "And Moses the servant of the Lord died in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth-Fegar, but no one knows the place of his burial to this day." This mysterious burial, performed by God himself, raised many questions. Why did God personally bury Moses, and why did he choose a secluded and unknown place for the grave? To understand this mystery, we need to pay attention to another rare episode in the Bible, in the Epistle of Jude, where it is mentioned that the archangel Michael argued with the devil over Moses' body. He did not dare to accuse the devil, but only said, "May the Lord forbid you." This mysterious dispute raises an important question. Why was it important for Satan to take possession of Moses' body? One possible reason is that the devil wanted to use the body of the great prophet to cause idolatry among the Israelites. The people could have begun to honor and worship Moses' remains, turning his grave into a shrine and forgetting that only God is worthy of worship. Therefore, God made sure that Moses' burial place remained unknown and inaccessible to the people, preserving the purity of their faith and protecting Israel from the temptation to fall into pagan customs. The cult of dead leaders was widespread in ancient times, and God knew that human weakness could lead to the creation of a cult of personality around Moses. That is why God himself performed his burial, hiding the place forever. This story remains one of the most mysterious in the Bible, emphasizing the unique relationship between God and Moses, and showing how great was the responsibility of the prophet, who not only led the people out of slavery but also became a symbol of faithfulness and humility before the will of the Most High. As we see in Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 12, the people of Israel were prone to idolatry in Moses' absence. Even his brief absence on Mount Sinai, when he received the law, led the people, driven by fear and unbelief, to create a golden calf and begin to worship it as a god. If Satan could use Moses' body as a sacred object, he could have led Israel away from their true purpose, worshiping the one living God. Such a cult would be a profound spiritual illusion, obscuring the truth and leading the people to spiritual destruction. Instead of heaven, he would lead them to worship hell. That is why God took radical measures. He hid Moses' body so that it would not become a source of temptation. Moreover, there is a suggestion that Satan sought not only idolatry but also the disruption of God's plan. The fact is that Moses reappears in the New Testament during the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain, where, together with Elijah, he converses with Christ. This event has profound symbolism. Moses represents the law, Elijah represents the prophets, and together they testify to Christ as the fulfillment of all God's promises. If Satan knew about this scene, he might have tried to prevent it by taking Moses' body and thus destroying the prophetic testimony. Another hypothesis is related to the possible supernatural power in Moses' body, for he was a great instrument of miracles. Moses' path was accompanied by powerful signs performed by God. The parting of the sea, manna from heaven, the rock that gave water. Satan could have sought to seize these manifestations of power in order to use them for deception, to distort God's glory and create false miracles, leading people astray. The display of Moses' body or his remains could have been an attempt to hijack God's glory and turn it into an idol. But God, in his wisdom and mercy, protected Israel from these spiritual threats by hiding Moses' body. He did not allow even the greatest prophet to become an object of worship, which would violate the first commandment, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." Moses, through his life and death, reminded us that the true miracle of faith is not in the remains of great men, but in trust in God and obedience to his will. Although Moses was close to God, spoke with him face to face, and performed great deeds, his physical presence did not become the basis of faith. His strength was in service, not in the body. God did not allow him to become a relic of the past, because the people were to worship only one, the living God. Before entering the Promised Land, Israel was to follow in faithfulness not the memory of Moses, but to God's guidance. Moses fulfilled his mission and departed, but God remained to lead his people. This reveals an important spiritual lesson to us. God's decision to hide Moses' body shows the importance of pure obedience, spiritual sobriety, and inner faithfulness. The archangel Michael, when confronted by Satan in the struggle for Moses' body, did not engage in direct confrontation with him, but simply said, "May the Lord forbid it." This shows that even in the battle against darkness, strength does not lie in shouting or threats, but in trusting in God and His power. It is precisely this position, not one's own strength, but obedience and trust, defeats evil. Michael showed how to defeat not with human truth, but with divine will. This episode reminds us that Satan is always looking for ways to pervert faith, turn the sacred into an object of false worship, and destroy the connection between man and the Creator. This threat is relevant today when people seek to worship objects, relics, ideas, or people instead of God. Moses' lesson is clear. Even he, the greatest prophet, remained in the shadow of the one who is above all, God Himself, and therefore his body was hidden so as never to distract attention from the heavenly to the earthly. I would like to apologize in advance for any errors in the text or dubbing. I am still learning, and the language used on this channel is not my native language. The dubbing was done using artificial intelligence. Please point out any errors so that I can correct them and improve the quality of the content. I would also be happy if you shared your thoughts on the topic. Your support in the comments motivates me to continue searching for new interesting stories. Thank you for your understanding and participation. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new stories.